Hello. The Department of Art and Art History is committed to expanding the diversity of artists who can serve as inspiration for students and catalyze their thinking and practice in the visual arts. My name is Ellie Mosman, and as department chair, it is my pleasure to welcome Susie Ganch as our Spring 2024 Scout Visiting Artist. The Scout Artist Series is an endowed program designed to highlight the work, ideology, and professional path of artists grounded in craft and 3D art-making disciplines. This series offers a pivotal means for connecting our students with award-winning visual artists who are leading the field in contemporary art. We are grateful for the ripple effect of vibrancy that results from the visiting artists who join us through this series. In addition to support from the Scott Visiting Artist Endowment, Susie's visit this week is made possible through the generosity of the Lilla B. Morgan Memorial Endowment and the Clara Hatton Gallery, as well as the efforts of the College of Liberal Arts Dean's Office, CSU Advancement, and the Alumni Center. Many thanks to our Scott Artist Series Committee, members of which are here tonight. Would you please stand as you're able to receive our appreciation? Sana Amani, Haley Bates, and now Jocelyn Goss, one of our graduate students in the metalsmithing and jewelry program, will join us at the podium to introduce Susie Ganch.
Susie, and we thank you for coming to enlighten us and hopefully leave us with a different frame of thought in making the world a better place to live. Susie Ganch is a fourth-generation jeweler and American artist of Hungarian heritage. She is a national and international sculptor, jeweler, educator, founder, and director of Radical Jewelry Makeover. She received her bachelor's in science from the University of Wisconsin-Madison in Geology in 1994, and her master's in fine arts from the University of Wisconsin-Madison in 1997. Presently, she works as an associate professor at Virginia Commonwealth University. Susie was recently awarded the 2024 James Renwick Alliance Distinguished Craft Educator Award, which is based on the recipient's reputation for excellence in innovation in education, influence on future artists, and significant contributions to American education in the craft field. Ms. Ganch's background in geology has heavily influenced her work that has centered on the conversations about the environment, consumption, beauty, and adornment. Ganch frequently repurposes and utilizes such materials as plastic, utensils, coffee cups, and masks for her sculptures. She has cultivated a deep appreciation in how traditional materials are embedded in both intrinsic and acquired values and meanings. We are so honored to have you here, Susie, and we thank you very much. And please join me and the rest of us in welcoming Susie Ganch as our guest Scott Series artist.
That was so awesome. You honor me. That introduction made me nervous. I'm so honored. Thank you, Jocelyn. That was really beautiful. And some of that you're also going to hear in my talk as well. I'm going to reset the timer so that I don't get off track. I write my presentation, so bear with me. And then also, Sanam, Haley, I'm so excited we're finally in one place and we're doing this material core project. I mean, it's been awesome, and thanks to all of the students today, and Michael and the journalism students, it has been amazing to collaborate with you. I'm filled, I'm really filled, so thank you for that. Okay, so on to the business at hand. Today, I'm going to talk to you about two facets of my studio practice that have been my focus for the last 17 years. Radical Jewelry Makeover, as Jocelyn talked about, and also my independent studio practice. I hope that through this talk, I'll be able to share my motivations as an artist and to highlight why I do what I do, and further, maybe a little bit, to tell a story similar to what you're doing in Material Core, a little bit. I'm a fourth generation jeweler, as Jocelyn mentioned. My grandfather, pictured here in front of his store in Budapest before the Holocaust and World War II, was one of 11 brothers. All of them were required to learn the trade of jewelry before going on to pursue any other career. My grandfather was the only one that stuck to it, also, by the way. Their father, my great-great-grandfather, believed that an education in learning how to make jewelry was essential, a foundation to any career. And I have to admit that I believe him. Learning how to manipulate and collaborate with metal has made me see the world very differently. I problem solve everything through the lens of jewelry, and it has shaped the way that I am as an artist. The two pair of earrings on the right are the only two pieces I have from my grandfather, who I never met. He died as Mauthausen was being liberated by the Americans at the end of the war. Jewelry, I believe, has superpowers. We commemorate events and people by wearing it. We signify status by wearing it. We celebrate our individuality and sexuality by wearing it. And we protect ourselves through its talismanic powers. Some jewelry embodies only one of these qualities, and some covers several of these functions. These earrings, for me, do all of the above. They tie me to a lineage. They tie me to people, reminding me of their protection and power. And they make me feel beautiful when I wear them. If my house was on fire, I would grab these and run. Over the course of this presentation, I'm going to come back to these earrings because of their power and significance. So let's jump into my work. I divide my art practice between independent studio work and collaborative work. Collaboratively, I direct Radical Jewelry Makeover, or RJM, which is an international traveling community jewelry mining and recycling project that draws attention to the creativity and skills of local jewelry designers. It reveals the stories behind our personal collections, and it encourages reconsideration of our habits of consumption. It brings together volunteer miners, people who dig out and donate their old jewelry, with volunteer jewelers and students working together as refiners and designers. Back in 2007, I joined forces with artist and activist Christina Miller, pictured here on the left, to design this project after realizing we were questioning our work in similar ways and wanted to use our studio practices and classrooms to find solutions while continuing to make. While we both agreed that we loved the field of jewelry, we were also concerned with where our materials were coming from. We wanted to know more about the opaque supply chain that miraculously presented us with beautiful, shiny sheets of metal and gems. We wanted transparency and understanding so that we could make informed decisions when making. We were also extremely concerned with the waste generated by our field and wanted to do something about it. To further explain why I was motivated to do this, I have a Bachelor of Science in Geology, and during my field studies, I dreamed of becoming a field geologist in order to explore land for its mineral potential. I finished my education in Utah along the Wasatch Front, where I learned to make geologic maps that could be used by mining companies to assess mine sites. It was there, while spending every day walking the land, picking up clues, building my maps, that I realized I could not pursue my dream at the expense of the land. It was too beautiful and precious. 10 years later, I realized I had inadvertently done just that by changing course and becoming a jeweler. I hadn't connected the dots between my new love of jewelry and my environmental values. Here's one of the first facts that connected these for me. In 2007, the No Dirty Gold campaign reported that for every one gold ring produced, over 20 tons of waste rock were created. This figure fluctuates from mine to mine, but think about that, 20 tons of waste for that one small ring on your finger. And further, calling rock waste is a little problematic in my mind. To give you an idea of how much rock we're talking about, this man is standing next to a 25-ton boulder. RJM is part of the outreach arm of Ethical Metalsmiths, a nonprofit dedicated to responsible jewelry practices through education, connection, and action. I'm not going to go into EM programming today, but I urge you to spend some time on our website. There's some great stuff on there. So here's how the project works. RJM is invited and hosted by universities, colleges, and art centers, along with a gallery that work together to involve the local community. We create a call to action donation drive, which asks for the community's unwanted, mismatched, or broken jewelry. We see this as a way of turning local people into miners and having them dig into their jewelry boxes for us. We look at our donors like citizen anthropologists who are combing through their collections, hoards, and histories, separating what is to be kept and what is to be given. It is a request that requires mindful participation in that people are investigating their jewelry, its stories, its meaning, its value. Even though this might seem like a small action, the project uses this as a platform to raise awareness of our habits of consumption and collecting, to bring an awareness and understanding of how their unwanted jewelry could be put back into use in a valuable way. As our project is also meant to interrogate the jewelry industry, this is where our transparent supply chain really begins, at donors' jewelry boxes. It is important to mention here that hard rock mining is labeled the dirtiest industry in the nation. Methods used to extract metals from the ground cause environmental damage in perpetuity. Not only does this industry cause harm to the environment, but also to the communities around the mines. At this time, it is difficult to know where your materials are coming from if you are buying or wearing jewelry or making jewelry. There's a lack of transparency so that you can't even know where the damage has been done or if your purchase of materials was through a better source that did less harm. This is why RJM creates a supply chain that starts at local communities' jewelry boxes. We're trying to make a point about sourcing. Once we receive the material, we sort it, categorize it, and put it into a situation so that it can be easily reused. Donors are sent a coupon so that they can get a made-over piece, and that is based on the reuse value of their materials. This is another way that we see the project educating participants about what materials are used to make jewelry broadly across the industry and field. We receive about 100 pounds of jewelry at each installment. It's pretty crazy. 99% of that is costume, while the other 1% is precious. Of course, 99% is costume. Most of us are probably wearing costume jewelry in this room. It's cheap, it's easy to purchase, it's easy to wear, and it's easy to replace. It wasn't even made to last. In our RJM system, this jewelry has the lowest reuse value because it is difficult to use. It is brittle, we don't always know where it comes from, and it has a really strong aesthetic. More importantly, this jewelry is not recyclable. Making this jewelry into new jewelry often means only extending its life for a short while longer. The other 1% of the materials are precious, like gold and silver, and those are 100% recyclable over and over and over without degradation. And these materials are assessed at the highest value, and the coupons reflect that. Then we work with jewelers to remake this material into new jewelry. We create collaborative work environments where jewelers share ideas, trade techniques, and help each other. The project also is one of its missions is to build community. One of our goals is always to catalyze regional communities where independent jewelers are often used to working in isolated studio situations. So far we have collaborated with over 1,500 people, creating an international network of artists and jewelers. One of the main challenges of RJM is to turn the unwanted materials that are donated into jewelry that is wanted. Part of the project's mission is to create jewelry that can go back out into the world and tell the story of how it got to where it is. With that in mind, making this jewelry requires incredible ingenuity and innovation, and the project invites experimentation and offers space and time and materials to do it. We also challenge participants with design strategies that consider human and environmental health as the primary design considerations for making the work. Artists are challenged to really alter or transform each piece of jewelry. If it's not transformed, it does not go out into the world. Ultimately, we really want this jewelry to subvert the worlds of high-end and fashion jewelry. So far, there have been 20 installments of the project, and hundreds, thousands of pieces of made-over jewelry are out in the world being worn. Each time we've collaborated with a community, the project has been different because of the needs and interests of the groups we collaborate with. In Wisconsin, for instance, we hired an actor to read stories shared by donors about jewelry that they gave to the project during our kickoff symposium. People in the audience were laughing and crying and were incredibly moved to hear what people wrote. These stories remind us that jewelry holds particular significance for us. As I said before when talking about my grandfather's earrings, we wear it to celebrate our individuality, but also to communicate important information, like being married or partnered with another person. We pass pieces on to our children and family members. It serves as a reminder of significant events and memories. So why would we want to imbue such significance on an object that potentially caused significant harm to another human being or to the environment? The last point I'll make about RJM is to say that the project really demonstrates how two very different sides of one industry mix together in people's minds and in their jewelry boxes. Those are costume and luxury jewelry. And while the project is fun, RJM is a way for me to talk about problems of sourcing and transparency while offering practical solutions for how a jeweler can continue to have a vital studio practice. And I do this because until traceability becomes the norm, in my opinion, the most responsible option for jewelers is recycling. We're lucky that precious metal fits within the technical nutrient cycle of a cradle-to-cradle production system, meaning that metals such as gold and silver can be used over and over again, as I mentioned before. This is really complicated, though, because unfortunately there are really significant problems with recycling. So I'm just going to take a minute and contradict myself for a second. So one, recycling does not help us pinpoint where our metals came from originally. And two, recycling has done little to change the demand for newly mined gold or other materials that we rely on. So really, by not participating in the supply chain of newly mined material, we're not influencing the industry for the better. In a sense, it is important to support companies engaged in best practices in order to change the industry. And this is why organizations like Ethical Metalsmiths are so important, because they do supply you with important information to help you make these choices. So, and then three, with costume jewelry, as I talked about, we can't truly recycle, we can only reuse. And so with all of that in mind, my aim with the project is to empower jewelers to participate, make changes in their studio, and to do it in a way that keeps their eyes open to all of the pros and cons within our field. There's always more to say about RJM as well as what is happening in the industry and the sustainable jewelry movement. I put some links up here, and I can also share them with Haley and Sanam if the students want them, if you want to find out more. Okay, so how does all of this affect my independent studio practice? Well, it has really made me think about what I make, why I make, and how I make it. Before I landed on trash as my material of choice, I spent several years making or generating multiple elements to be used in the pieces that I was making that were inspired by the interconnected system of the universe. As I explored these different ideas, jewelry was in some cases the perfect medium. By wearing the pieces, I could extend the boundaries of the body, or in my imagination, restructure the body to be comprised of individual elements, molecules, or stuff that we can in fact see. Or I could offer a tactile sensory experience related to what I was thinking, as in this bracelet, which on the outside is reminiscent of a classic bangle, while on the inside it is made up of hundreds of cast plastic molecules. So we know everything is made up of molecules, cells, and atoms, but what do those feel like? I was wondering when I made this, what would it feel like if I could feel the individual molecules of a bracelet as it slid over my hand? Constructed similarly to a suspension bridge, this piece distributes its strength and tension, allowing it to hold a wrist in its center. As in all of the work in the series, and even to this day, each little element is necessary for the system to function. This large wall panel, constructed with hundreds of enameled rings, is the representation of a vibration or a ripple from a drip. So I'm making this work. I'm getting more and more involved with Radical Jewelry Makeover and ethical metalsmiths. And one of my graduate students, Gabriel Craig, who came with me as an assistant for RJM at Penland School of Crafts, challenged me. One day we were sitting out at the picnic tables after a long day, and he said to me, "How can you do this project and not put its values into your studio work?" I knew he was right. I mean, he got me right in that moment. You know, he was deeply right. But I, like many jewelers, I love that blank slate to work with, those shiny sheets of beautiful metal that miraculously arrived at my doorstep. It was hard to let go of that. It took me time to consider what I could let go of without compromising what I wanted to do. So now, instead, after thinking about this, instead of generating multiples, I use trash, found material, and things given to me. It not only feels better to use what is already here, but it has opened up a whole new layer of meaning in my work that is so vital. So this piece, titled Falling in Love, 1999, is about falling in love with my husband, Jared. In those early days, and even still, I wanted to consume him, swallow him whole, and I wondered, what would he feel if in fact he could survive inside me, if his hands were inside my hands like a pair of gloves? So this piece invites the audience to reach into my imaginary arms that are extended out and feel my molecular makeup. But because I'm using material collected from my local community to represent my molecular makeup, I'm suggesting that these arms could be anyone's arms, anyone's molecular makeup. The personal becomes the universal. All of the white pieces that were gathered, found, or given to me as cast-offs over months of time are sewn together in a suspension system, stretched and floating inside a fabricated steel exoskeleton. In this image, called Drag, a woman wears a bracelet that grows as it accumulates more and more bits and pieces of unwanted trash. The piece leaves room to question whether the woman knows she is stymied by the piece or not. The sculpture that was completed after the image is meant to be beautiful, yet an unmistakable dirty pile of garbage hooked into the wall, creating tension between growth and restriction. It is made from a series of gradually expanding interconnected links of woven steel covered in collected trash. Another layer of importance that RJM has instilled in me is my consideration of the future. What happens when these pieces are no longer vital or relevant? Well, I designed them specifically so that they can be taken apart, separated, and recycled, or what can't be recycled, as in much of the plastic junk thrown away. And for the metal students, it's all mostly cold connected work. Looking for inspiration from our waste stream has opened up so many possibilities that I never would have seen. The things that I collect from my local or Instagram community tie me physically to the world outside my studio and serve as a record and reminder of our collective habits of consumption. This piece is from the Pile series and is 8 by 10 feet. The Pile series of tapestries all depict different oceanic current systems from used coffee lids. Remember Me, Katrina, for example, was commissioned for the reopening celebration at the Milwaukee Art Museum and was part of Rubbish, an exhibition highlighting work with repurposed materials. The tapestry is 12 by 7 feet and depicts the currents of the Gulf of Mexico. It was made as a memorial on the 10-year anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. Pile has a double meaning. On the one hand, it is an obvious heap or accumulation of trash, while on the other hand, pile is the reference to the creation of tufts or loops of yarn in a tapestry. From a distance, these pieces might initially draw someone in because of the mystery of the material and what is being seen. They're meant to be beautiful from far away. Up close, the coffee lids are dirty and covered with coffee stains, chocolate, caramel, and lipstick, sometimes chewing gum too. Each lid was touched by a different set of lips, again signifying our commonality and complicity in this wonderful and yet terrible world. Materials are embedded with their own story, wisdom, and knowledge. I rely on this when I choose my materials. And then I have to say that these pieces really begin when I start collecting. Relying on my community is important. If I can't get the material, I can't do the piece. And there's an obvious push-pull with that need and reliance. On the one hand, I dread getting this material. On the other hand, I'm relieved to get this material. Being a jeweler, like I said, I problem solve and use materials in a particular way. When scaling up my work from jewelry size, I always have to consider the best way to connect and build my pieces. And for the tapestries, what came to mind was a price tagging gun because of thinking about rivets. Rivets are price tagging gun, essentially. Anyway, for the metals people. Or here, I'm making washers from plastic containers to be used when I grommet the quilted backing for the piece. Fields of Plenty is an idealized landscape made from plastic bags, memorializing a hike through Basque country in Spain. Along the walls are oscillating fans blowing a gentle breeze that is sentimentally reminiscent of whirlwinds that play on grass fields stretching across countrysides around the world. The scale of this piece is approximately 21 by 24 feet, with a ceiling height in this situation of 15 feet. The materials I love working with have a lifespan based on exposure to light and air. Plastic bags might live up to 20 years before they begin to transform, crack, and break down. This means that this landscape will eventually crumble, adding another layer of meaning and metaphor. It has become one of my studio values that when I leave this world, my work will be ready to leave too. In this way, my philosophy is non-legacy driven, meaning that unlike the work of my grandfather, what I make will not necessarily endure to be passed down to future generations. This image is titled Bale. Bale has two meanings. The first and obvious one is that it means to bundle materials by tightly wrapped bound cords or hoops. The second meaning comes from the origin of the word, which is from Old English and means great evil or sorrowful woe. It is very difficult to vilify, or it's very easy to vilify plastics, right? But the truth is, it has benefits that are not easily yet surpassed. We have not found solutions that don't create new problems themselves. It feels important to poke at our track record of recycling and our lack of ability to process or use what people honorably put in their recycling bins. Since the 1950s, when plastics were taking off as our go-to material, we have only recycled about 9% of the materials that we've made since that time and continue to make. That means that 91% of all plastics produced have not been turned back into useful materials. Much of it will sit in landfills, clog our oceans, and fill our landscapes. In the foreground of the image on the right is a landscape using bottles from my daily pill regimen, along with faux pearl beads collected from my Instagram community. In the background is a tapestry that is now at the Gregory Allicar Museum, which I'm really excited about. Thank you. Everyone, I hope you go see it. I'm really excited to share that with you. And that's also made from used single-use plastic shopping bags, also collected from Instagram. My inspiration for the landscape was Purissima Creek Redwood Preserve in California, which is one of my favorite landscapes. Drawing on my background in geology, I translated a topographic map into an elevation chart, and then using different bottle sizes and heights, I recreated the 10-mile trail's 2,000-foot elevation change. Here's another view of that. And then using Western engraving techniques, I drew the trail as well as represented different microclimates found in the special ecosystem of Purissima. Everyone who sent me quantities of pearls for the project received a brooch, and here are some examples. I think of these as brooches of gratitude, but also perhaps maybe badges of shame. In my mind, it really represents the complexity of how it is that we navigate our lives in the 21st century.
I continue to make jewelry, which is sometimes the best way to express an idea. The next few images are jewelry made from the same daily pill regimen bottles that I collect. So every bottle that I finish, I put it away and I have to use it. It's one of my rules, so my basement is kind of crazy. The overarching themes with this work are similar to the piece about Purissima, poking at our relationship between the planetary and corporeal landscapes. Currently, for one, the corporeal landscape, in order for that to thrive, the other planetary landscape has to suffer. And then here you can see the engraving a little better on the surface, perhaps. I use a die cutter to cut sequins from the bottles. Another little hope for the medical students. Another ongoing series uses, again, used single-use shopping bags to build tapestries of emoji and symbol sentences. This piece is 6 feet tall by 2 feet wide. The blue color is New York Times newspaper delivery bags. Another form of landscape, these large-scale hand-tufted shredded tapestries explore solastalgia, or eco-anxiety, and the stages of grief related to climate change. Communicating with emojis and symbols is such a common way to express ourselves. In my life, I find myself at times relying on and hiding behind their ambiguity, their sarcasm, and their lack of nature. At times, I use them when I'm uncomfortable being direct, and yet they embody so much meaning. And so with this series, I'm sincerely broadcasting my feelings about environmental change, but I'm also allowing the audience to meet me wherever they are in the conversation. I'm also considering what plastics might have to say in all of this. I wonder if it shares my opinions, and if it is pleased with the voice or agency that I'm giving it. As confusing as it is, I see myself as both an advocate for and against the items that we conveniently throw in our recycle bins. Truly, it is not plastic that is the enemy of the environment, but rather it's us and the choices that we're making when we use them. Here are some installation images. In a forest ecosystem, nurse logs provide protection, nutrients, shade, and water to seedlings that are fallen trees decay, they help the next generation of trees. In landscape number 3, my nurse logs are used water bottles that have twined, single-use plastic shopping bags covering their surfaces. A tender gesture of protection, the coating is also hopeful and beautiful. Necklace for a narwhal whale is 12 feet long and constructed out of my lid collection and couched with old faux pearl beads like similar work. In the detail on the right, you can see the functional barrel clasp made from water bottle tops. Drift is a sound sculpture over a rolling din of man-made sound recordings. There's bird songs that chirp across the clouds. Made from the ubiquitous text tweet sound, I twisted it, stretched it, and flipped it into a new species of bird, familiar and yet not real. My point with this piece is to talk about our mediated existence and our divorce from nature. We can recognize the sounds from our phones, but have lost the ability to name the trees, plants, and birds in our local surroundings. Sound that guided us and gave meaning to the world around us for millennia have been replaced. Instead, from a distance, the whirl of highway traffic sounds remarkably like the sound of waves crashing on the beach. And melodic bird calls that once only asked that we listen can now be reminders of birthdays and meetings. Our attachment and acceptance to our new reality is remarkable to me and one that I'm constantly coming to terms with. In this detail image, you can see how the piece was made. Thousands of earbuds are woven into panels of plexiglass and bezels set with rubber grommets. Landscape number 5, Pixel, is another project exploring landscapes and the reciprocal impact they have on our lives. Here, the mediated digital landscape, ever present, is exaggerated and rendered from thousands of strips of used plastic bags. Both the pixel and plastic evoke a new form of landscape as their ubiquity and material DNA have endless reach, celebrating our worship of the present and disregard for the future. In truth, I had a selfish motivation when making this piece. I wanted to climb inside of a pixel to understand its perspective, to find empathy for another adversary to our living, breathing, physical world. Somehow, I want to shift my own understanding of the narratives we are making as a cultural whole. By making my work, I build new associations that help me find resolve and maybe even some optimism for a future that at times looks kind of bleak to me and a little uncomfortable. Here are some process shots. The overall project is 4 by 4 feet. And here's a shot of how I tufted the plastic. This is a 32 by 6 foot 3-dimensional mural set above the Madison Children's Museum in their new Wonderground space. The Wonderground was designed and built by artists and architects from the Madison, Wisconsin region. With sustainability and used materials as a mission of the museum, I was invited to create a piece that would be part of the space, but also visible to cars and pedestrian traffic on their way up to the state capitol building. Taking my inspiration from water again, this piece offers the view looking up at the sky from below the water's ripples. This piece is made from 7,200 bottles. Based on recycling statistics from Dane County, Wisconsin, which is where Madison is located, it takes 20 minutes for the citizens of Madison to throw away this many bottles. Every 20 minutes, 24 hours a day. Over months of collecting, I used social media, but also went on a daily hunt to recycling dumpsters across Henrico County, near to where I live. One of my favorite parts of my practice is talking to people. As folks came to drop off their recycling, I asked if they had water bottles. People started collecting and helping me by bringing me weekly materials when they knew I'd be there. I enjoyed the connections and conversations I had, and I also have to confess, I love dumpster diving. It teaches me so much graduations of color. Using their own caps, all of the bottles were screwed to polycarbonate sheeting, which is made from the same material as the bottles. So this means that when this piece is no longer relevant or wanted, it can be taken to the recycling center as is. Going back to my great-great-grandfather's belief in a jewelry education, this piece is essentially a large pawn setting. I fabricated aluminum hardware that connects to pre-existing beams, and in that hardware are steel set screws that lock the aluminum frame in place, similar to rock settings. The last project I'll show you is one that I'm just finishing. It's happening right now at Sweetbriar College. Located in the Appalachian Mountains, the school invited me to create an installation and to work with students and faculty across the campus. I decided to use water bottles again, this time making a color graduation based on the geographic elevations where the school is located. Dark represents the highest elevations, while light tones are lower. Cloud seating invites students to spend time and gather in the space, to rest in the in-between. In my imagination, the students will become the wind, moving the clouds across the floor to find an ideal place to sit. Here are some process shots. So I used a U.S. Geologic survey map, scanned it, and separated the topographic elevations with color, then pixelated it in CAD to show me how the bottles would create the sculpture. The college has an enormous greenhouse which had a big accident. They installed the roof incorrectly, and the whole roof blew off during the storm a few years ago. It was kind of bananas. And so they saved all of the ruined panels in the back where the maintenance crew was, and they allowed me to use all of the panels that I wanted. So students helped me select and wash them, and then I cut them to the scale that I needed, which was amazing because I didn't have to source anything new for the project. Oh, sorry, I wanted to turn it up. So then I CNC'd them to fit the bottles. And we collected 14,000 bottles of clear and green for this project. And we had cleaning sessions with students over the fall term. Everyone is always surprised by the amount of time and labor it takes to truly reuse materials. For me, it's a really important part of my practice. It's become really one of the maybe more important parts. I really love shepherding this material. And I honestly feel like that's what I am. I'm somebody who's shepherding materials, trying to respectfully collaborate with them. So back in my studio, here you can see how I shred. So I separated the green tones into different colors and then shredded them. And then on the left you can see, so you can see that. And on the right you can see the graduation of color I came up with, which has seven different tones. After the bottles were stuffed, we screwed them into 2 layers of polycarbonate sheeting, which gave the panels extra strength. So that's how we do it. One person in back, one person in front. The cloud seating was made from cast-off leftover cuts of upholstery foam that a company gave me, along with different leftover rolls of fabric that they were also throwing away. So we cut up the foam. Instead of using peanuts for beanbag chairs, we cut them up into small sizes so that we could fill the clouds. And here are some installation shots. So I built, I think you can see this in the back behind the piece, so I built a scaffolding system and attached it to the plinths, and then also atop that arcade, and then stacked the different panels on top of each other and used the pipes to pull them in. Here's a back view. As you saw in some previous images, my studio is really small. It's like 325 square feet. And so for me, installation day is extremely exciting. It's really the first time I get to meet the piece. I mean, sometimes I'm storing things in the living room, in the dining room, in my studio, and in the basement, anywhere that I can get it, so that I can take it to the site. It's also when I get to see if my idea will work. I mean, for this, honestly, I didn't sleep for weeks. I was like, I just never know, you know. I guess that's the, I'm never going to be a skydiver, but I get to do this. And here's another process shot. So in this case, I think I would share this story too, because again, it brings in my jewelry background. So in this case, there was a minor problem when we were installing. The arcade molding came out a little bit too far, and the sculpture was too big to fit the arcade hole. And so I had my emergency kit. I brought a jeweler's saw, and I just cut out a little bit of a notch in there, and it fit in perfectly. Again, jewelry. And then here's the last back view and a little bit of how it's made. And then here's the final installation, or final image with my installation team that came with me to help. Thanks for your time today. That was it.